I just started the recording of this session and welcome everyone. And I just wanted to let you know if you have questions, you can put them in the chat and I will see them. Cantor Michal requested that we save questions to the end, and I will remind everyone when we have 15 minutes left in this session, and we can start the questions then. Anybody have any questions or need anything before Cantor Michal gets started? Okay, take it away. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Cantor Michal. I am a Jew by choice, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But first, I wanted to take a poll, and the easiest way to do that is like a thumbs up or a thumbs down. For those of you that I can see your video. How many of you think that Judaism has ever been a proselytizing religion? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Okay. We've got about, I think, half and half. So I was actually surprised when I started to do the research for this, that to find out that there were periods in Jewish history when Judaism was a proselytizing religion. So we are, hopefully we're going to learn some of those periods tonight. I have 25 slides to get through. Just briefly, I want to share my own journey. I did convert for marriage back almost 40 years ago. I told my husband that my religion was very important to me and that I wouldn't convert just for marriage, but I did promise to raise our children Jewish. So in order to do that, I wanted to study Judaism, to do the very best job that I could in helping my husband to raise our children Jewish. And I found that the more I studied, the more I loved Judaism. And I took the Judaism classes. I think I started in taking it in my third year, and then I decided that, okay, I could drop out, learned Hebrew, etc. At one point, after my second child was born, it was time. I remember calling up my rabbi and saying, what would you think if I wanted to convert? And he said, Michelle, I'm Cantor Michal, but I'm also AKA Michal Grace Schaffer. He said, Michelle, you've been living as a Jew for so many years. I would say, you're ready. So I converted soon after that. And all I can say is Judaism is one of the highlights in my life. And everything that I have learned my whole life, I enjoy learning more and more. So I'm anxious to share with you what I have learned. So I've divided it up into 4 sections, and the first one is conversion in biblical Israel. Back in that time, 4,000, 3,000 years ago, up to about maybe 2,000 years ago, conversion was more like a gradual metamorphosis of a Gentile into a Jew. Like today, most people seeking to convert were doing so for the so that they could marry a Jew or a Jewess. Another way that people came into the religion was Jewish slave owners converting their slaves. Jewish owners did not force their slaves to convert, but they strongly suggested it. The slave was able to to say, no, I don't want to, or, let me try it on for size and come back to me in a few years. So that was not a forced conversion. Many of you are familiar with the term ger. Conversion was most likely open to the gerim, and that is not just people outside of Judaism. It was a legal category in ancient Israel, and it described a person, a permanent resident of the land, yet not someone who was worshiping the God of the Hebrews. And there were those who were not allowed to be accepted as converts. Those were eunuchs, Ammonites, Moabites, although Ruth was a Moabite. We're going to get to Ruth in a minute. And Edomites and Egyptians were only accepted in the third generation. So we have different quotes from the Torah. You stand this day, all of you, before the Lord your God, your tribal heads, your elders and your officials, all the men of Israel, your children, your wives, even the stranger within your camp, to enter into the covenant of the Lord your God. And then Deuteronomy 29, verse 13, I make this covenant with its sanctions, not with you alone, but both with those who are standing here with us today before the Lord our God, and with those who are not with us this day. And the rabbis of the Talmudic era weighed in on this and said it was all of the souls that Jewish souls that were yet to be, and this included Jews by choice. So we have some mention of converts in the prophets. In the 13th century BCE. I hate to get ahead of Rabbi Schiff, who's going to be doing Rahav the Harlot at 12 o'clock. But you probably know the story that Joshua sends himself and Caleb into Canaan to scout out Jericho, and Rahav is I think the rabbis say that she was one of the 10 most beautiful women ever in the world. She hid them and asked that in return, she and her family be saved when they made war against Jericho, which indeed is what happened. And the Midrash tells us that Joshua then married Rahav. In Isaiah, Isaiah tells us, as for the foreigners who attach themselves to the Lord, to minister to God, and to love the name of the Lord, to be God's servants, all who keep the Sabbath and do not profane it, and who hold fast to my covenant, I will bring them to my sacred mount and let them rejoice in my house of prayer. Their burnt offering and sacrifices shall be welcome on my altar, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. So there were many of our classical prophets who were open to proselytes. And also they prophesied, they envisioned that at the end of days, other nations, all nations, would join together in the worship of the God of Israel. So tomorrow starts Shavuot, and of course, on Shavuot, we read the book of Ruth. Ruth is perhaps our most famous convert. I have to say that I feel a kindred spirit, as a kindred spirit with Ruth, because we both married a Jew, but came to Judaism later out of conviction. So this is one of the most famous quotes in the Bible. But Ruth replied, "Do not urge me to leave you and to turn back and not follow you, for wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. Thus and more may the Lord do to me, if anything but death part me from you." So I was reading a book by Robert M. Seltzer, and he feels that this could have been an ancient formula, that maybe it didn't, wasn't uttered, just Ruth didn't say it. Maybe this was what was required of a convert back then. So, I will follow your religion. I will live amongst you. I will be part of the Jewish people, and I will, I will be buried not only, with the Jewish custom, but, whatever is in the afterlife, I hope to do it in a Jewish way. So going on in history, so now we're about 2,500 years ago. The Jews have been in captivity in Babylon. They come back. Ezra and Nehemiah they come back to organize the demoralized and disorganized city of Jerusalem. They were in the I think it's about 40 years that the Jews were in captivity. Don't quote me on that. I'm trying to do math in my head, and maybe it's 45, 46 years before they were allowed to come back. They didn't all come back in 539 from 586. But they're coming back from the Babylonian exile, and not all the Jews were exiled to Babylon. Many stayed in Palestine, but when Ezra and Nehemiah come back, they say, if you have wives from amongst the people of the northern tribes, I think it was known as, it wasn't Palestine, but anyway, Samaria. It was called Samaria at the time. you have to renounce those wives. And there were actually lots of priests that were left in Jerusalem who had to renounce their wives, and they are listed by name in these books. And then later, during the Persian occupation, the evidence we have that there was conversion going on is we have the Jews undertook and irrevocably obligated themselves and their descendants and all who might join them to observe these 2 days in the manner prescribed and at the proper time each year. And this is because after Haman fell and Mordecai, kind of took over Haman's place, many Jews declared themselves, or many Persians declared themselves Jews. So now we're moving into the Hellenistic, Roman, and Talmudic times. This actually was the most active period for proselytization, or proselytization. I might have just made that up, in the Jewish history. So this is attested to in many Jewish sources, but also in the Greek and Roman sources. So the Jewish propaganda attacked paganism as absurd and defective. And the argument was, why would people follow gods who acted with sexual depravity and frequent deceptions? During, we will get to this because I have a slide and a few slides, but at one period, there was forced conversion by the Hasmonean dynasty. And you will know that, you will probably remember that the Hasmonean dynasty came from Judah Maccabee. Actually, he was killed during the battles, some of the battles, and the Hasmonean dynasty actually came down through his brother, Simon. Moving on to the next point, there was individual missionary activity by Jewish travelers and settlers. And there was also a growing reputation of Jewish monotheism, the Hebrew scriptures, the Jewish people, and its ethos. And even though what we know about the time of the Maccabees would have us think differently, because part of what they were doing was trying to stop the bleeding of Jews who were embracing Hellenism. The Hellenists really admired Judaism. They thought that it had a lot of points that were shared with their philosophers. But for the most part, this was not reciprocated, at least from the Jewish authorities. So Philo of Alexandria was a Hellenistic Jewish philosopher who lived in Alexandria. He lived around the turn of the centuries from before the Common Era and until through the Common Era. Believe it or not, he tried to harmonize Moses and Plato into one philosophical system. And from the Greek, we get the proselytos, one who has arrived, and that comes to designate someone who has left polytheism and arrived at a new and God-pleasing life. And this is from his writings. The proselyte exalted aloft by his happy lot will be gazed at from all sides, marveled at, and held blessed by all for two things of highest excellence, that he came over to the camp of God, and that he has won a prize best suited to his merits, a place in heaven firmly fixed, greater than words dare describe, while the nobly born, that is, someone who was born a Jew, who had falsified the sterling of his high lineage, will be dragged right down and carried into Tartarus itself and profound darkness. So that shows that there was high regard for proselytes. During the Hasmonean period, which was, 140 to 37 before the Common Era, that was the only time that the Jews forcibly extended conversion to people who had not asked to come under its jurisdiction. So John Hyrcanus was the great-grandson of Simon, and under his reign, he forced the conversion of the Idumeans, and you can see that. Well, I guess my cursor is not working, but anyways, it's the bright red, quite a large country in the map. And his son, Aristobulus the First, forcibly Judaized the Iturians in the Galilee a few decades later. And I don't know if you can see this, but Iturea is the pink in the northeast part of, it's northeast of Samaria. So the traditions about the Pharisees of the first century, and our Christian friends are very familiar with the term Pharisees. I don't believe that we are, but I think you can substitute, rabbis, the teachers. Traditions about the Pharisees of the first century allude to their enthusiasm about conversion. And this is a very famous story. Once there was a Gentile who came before Shammai, who was one of the great sages, and said to him, "Convert me on the condition that you should teach me the whole Torah while I stand on one foot." And when I'm teaching this to kids, I like to say that Shammai was a carpenter and he chased him away with a 2x4. So then the same Shmendrik came before Hillel, and Hillel converted him, saying, "That which is despicable to you, do not do to your fellow. This is the whole of Torah, and the rest is commentary. Go and learn it." So Hillel was more open to converts, more accepting, and I think you can what is this? What is the old saw? You can catch more flies with honey than vinegar. So I kind of think of Shammai as being, the vinegar and Hillel the honey. In the New Testament, the Christian disciple Matthew ascribes a veritable passion for proselytizing to the Pharisees. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you traverse sea and land to make a single proselyte. And when he becomes a proselyte, you make him twice as much a child of hell as yourselves. And then rabbinic traditions attribute proselyte ancestors to such sages as Shemaiah and Avtalion of the 1st century before the Common Era, and to Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Akiva of the 2nd century CE. And these were all very important sages of this era. So we're now into the rabbinic era, and you will know that things changed in 70 CE when the Romans destroyed the temple and Jews were dispersed all over the world. During this period, the procedure of conversion that had been before personal and spontaneous and uncontrolled became standardized and consisted of 3 things: milah, circumcision; tefillah, tevilah, immersion in pure water; and also offering a temple sacrifice, except this must have been before 70 CE, because after 70 CE, of course, there was no more second temple. So I think the rabbis were putting down what was already the practice. And according to the Mishnah and the Talmud, the status of a convert was the same as a born Jew, with some caveats. They were allowed to marry anyone, even a Kohen, except women could only marry a Kohen if they were circumcised, not circumcised, if they were converted before age 3 and 1 day. Converts were never allowed to be a judge in criminal court. Sometimes they could be a judge in a civil case. They could be a judge in both a criminal and a civic case if they were judging a fellow convert. But then again, there were some authorities, there were some areas that wouldn't allow them to be a judge at all. And then the next point, making proselytes was considered an especially honorable task, an imitation of Abraham. And I think probably most of you know this, that when someone becomes a convert, their parents for an aliyah are Avraham v'Sarah, Abraham and Sarah. The Midrash Tanhuna called the proselyte dearer to God than all the Israelites who stood at the foot of Mount Sinai. So this is high praise indeed. In 132 Common Era, there was the Bar Kokhba revolt. And what happened during this period is many of the proselytes reverted to their former ways. which may have led to the concept of the Talmudic interrogation of the sincerity of prospective proselytes. If at the present time a man desires to become a proselyte, he is to be addressed as follows. What reason have you for desiring to become a proselyte? Do you not know that Israel at the present time are persecuted and oppressed, despised, harassed, and overcome by afflictions? If he replies, I know, and yet I am unworthy, he is accepted forthwith and is given instruction in some of the minor and some of the major commandments. And this shows a preference among the rabbis for sincere converts with no ulterior motives. And this was always the case in the 3,000-4,000 years that we've been accepting converts, that there was a preference, a marked preference for converts with no ulterior motives. The next point, the 3rd century Amoras, Yohanan and Eliezer, are quoted as saying, the Holy One, blessed be God, scattered Israel among the nations for the sole end that proselytes should wax numerous among them. Not all rabbis were in favor. Rabbi Helbo, late 3rd century Common Era, observed that proselytes are injurious to Israel as a scab. And the different views held by the different rabbis are probably owing to whatever the contemporary condition was, the societal and the political climate, or that rabbi's personal experience with proselytes he had known. Now we're into proselytism in the Middle Ages and the early modern period. When Christianity became the state religion of Rome in 323 Common Era, it became illegal for Jews to seek converts. And then in 439, it became punishable by death. So obviously, proselytizing kind of tanked during this time. With the rise of Islam, 7th century, conversion of Muslims to Judaism and Christianity was a capital offense. Conversion still happened during this period on the frontiers, and it was suggested that perhaps this was to withstand pressures from the Muslims or the Christians to convert to those religions. One example is conversion of Yusuf du Nuwas. He was the king of Himyar in modern-day Yemen. Okay. Somehow I went backwards instead of forwards. Conversion in the 8th century of the Khazars. You might have heard of this. They were a pagan Turkish people. I didn't have a map for this, but they ruled over quite an extensive area that encompassed parts of European Russia, southern Ukraine, Crimea, and Kazakhstan. And I love the payas on the Kazakh warrior. Curiously, there are many mentions in both Christian and Jewish sources of Jewish conversion of clergy and nobles. And a few of the examples were Bodo, the court deacon of Louis the Pious in France, Johannes, a priest of a noble Norman family in Italy. And what's interesting is some of his writings were found in the Cairo Geniza, and one sample is actually found at the Little Museum at HUC Cincinnati. Perhaps some of you might have seen it there. And then an archbishop converted from an archbishop in Italy. Some converts even died of Kiddush Hashem as martyrs. There are numerous examples of this happening. One happened in 1265 at the beginning of the Crusades. When we get into medieval responsum on the religious status of the convert to Judaism, Maimonides liked converts. His letter to Obadiah the proselyte, an excerpt from that is, whoever adopts Judaism and confesses the unity of the divine name as it is prescribed in the Torah is counted among the disciples of Abraham our father. Do not consider your origin as inferior. While we are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you derive from God through whose word the world was created. And another thing that Maimonides wrote was rabbis in the earlier eras had told converts that there were parts of the prayers that they could not read in synagogue. Any of the prayers that mentioned, our ancestors, our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they couldn't read those parts, but Maimonides had a different opinion. Not all Jewish thinkers were fans of converts. Judah Halevi, a Spanish poet and philosopher, wrote, "Those who become Jews do not take equal rank with born Israelites, who are specially privileged to attain to prophecy, while the former can only achieve something by learning from them and can only become pious and learned, but never prophets." And also the Zohar, which is the classic Kabbalistic text, had the opinion proselytes have an honorable role in this world to transmit the divine light to lower worlds, but a distinction is made between them and born Jews with regards to connection with the Sfirot. Also, another another rabbi who was not really in favor of accepting proselytes was Rabbi Luria. Okay, all of a sudden. Now we're on to the 13 and 1400s. One way you can kind of think of conversos, also known as Marranos and New Christians, as converts is you probably know that they were forced to convert to Christianity during the Spanish Inquisition in both Spain and Portugal. But later, after they fled to other countries Ottoman Turkey, Italy, later Amsterdam and Bordeaux. They wanted to return to the Jewish religion, and depending on the community, they could either be immediately accepted as returning Jews, or they might be asked to convert in front of rabbis. Moving on, the 17th and 18th century Jewish writings indicate that Christianity was considered a Noahide religion whose adherents practiced monotheism and rejected idolatry. So conversionary activity declined. Moses Mendelssohn, in a letter to Johann Schaffer, who had suggested that Schaffer was suggesting that he wanted to convert, and Moses Mendelssohn said, "According to the principles of my faith, I must not seek to convert anyone not born a Jew. The zeal for making proselytes runs diametrically counter to the spirit of Judaism, assertions to the contrary by certain people notwithstanding. Our rabbis are not only far from feeling any compulsion to proselytize, but make a point of enjoining us to dissuade with the most serious arguments anyone asking to be converted. We are to tell any would-be convert how unnecessarily heavy a burden this decision would put on him. It should be evident then that my father's faith does not ask to be propagated." What was happening during this time is Judaism was becoming more insular. Still, a trickle of converts still found their way to Judaism. And among them, Lord George Gordon was a British politician born into Scottish nobility. He was described by Charles Dickens in his novel Barnaby Rudge as a true tzaddik. And also Warden Cresser was a Quaker. And his path to Judaism was when he became a consul in Jerusalem from the United States, and fell in love with Judaism, converted in 4 years. He became a prominent member of the Jerusalem Sephardi community, and he is buried on the Mount of Olives. Proselytism in modern times. So in the 19th century, a lot of things were happening in the Jewish world. The Jews won the right to become citizens. They were getting political rights for the first time in the countries in which they had found themselves. There was freedom from persecution for proselytism. But Jews had a lot on their plate in the 19th century. That was the time when the movements were forming. About the middle of the century was when the Reform movement started, and then the conservative movement formed kind of as a reaction to the Reform movement, and then the Orthodox movement differentiated itself from the other two. So they were all kind of busy figuring out their own paths. Also, what was going on for Gentiles, anti-Semitism and negative stereotypes of Jews acted as a deterrent to conversion. This had been going on for a long time, but it started to build in the 19th century. And then the Jews kind of, especially Reform Judaism, decided that it was to lead by example, not by missionary zeal. Getting to the 20th century, Jews are more open to the general culture, and they played a more active role in general society, and they are more accessible to non-Jews. Perhaps it is this social factor mainly that stimulates conversion to Judaism on a large scale, rather than a growth in the limited number of individual, thoughtful, religious thinkers. So Jews, more people knew the Jews than ever before. They were in open society. They no longer lived in the shtetls or the ghettos in the cities. They were taking a part. They had moved into the regular culture. Gentiles had more of a chance to interface with Jews. In the 20th century, the likeliest candidates for conversion still were people seeking to marry a Jew, or if already married to a Jew, deserving to have a Jewish household. The rate of interfaith marriage has increased so dramatically in recent decades that some sociologists suggest that the conversion to Judaism on the non-Jewish partner is a significant factor in maintaining the size of the American Jewish community against a shrinkage resulting from assimilation and a low birth rate. In the Reform movement in 1978, President Alexander Schindler advocated a more active program of proselytizing among the unchurched, a specific target group of non-Jewish fiancés and spouses. He repeated that at another Reform Movement's biennial meeting, and I was privileged enough to be there. Already having converted. So 61% of Jews married since 2010 have a non-Jewish spouse. Overall, 35% of American Jews have a non-Jewish spouse. I found this was not in the last point is this was not in the Pew Report that the Jewish Chronicle picked up on in their article this week, but 1 out of 6 American Jews, 17% of Jews say that they were raised in another religion. I find this incredible, an incredible statistic. And it kind of brings us back to Ruth, who married a Jew, found Judaism out of conviction, and she became the great-grandmother of King David. And she said, "Do not urge me to leave you and to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus and more may the Lord do to me, if anything but death part me from you." So do we have time? Oh, we have 1 minute for questions.
I didn't see any questions come up in the chat, but
If anybody wants to unmute and hi, Bob.
How are you? A long time no see. I was wondering if there was one particular experience that you had that sparked your desire, your need, your wish to convert to Judaism. That may be a difficult question to answer. There may be several experiences, but when you had that aha experience that I would love to be a Jew.
All of us, many Jews by choice say this, that they discovered that they were always a Jew.
Ah,
And
very-
so I believe that I was a Jew born in a Methodist body.
aha, I see. So you have a Jewish soul.
I have a Jewish soul.
Wonderful. Great seeing you. Thank you so much. The information was so wonderful. I didn't know much of it, so greatly
Me-
appreciate it.
I didn't know a lot of it either.
Very fascinating. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cantor.
That was
You're very welcome.
from Jessica.
We have to, well, she has.
okay.
Let's go to a new one.
Does anyone else have any questions?
And we also
Wanna
just
say
wanted to
thank
say
you.
thank you.
Thank you, Michal.
You're welcome.
We know about people who were Jewish but born in a Methodist body. Also,
You know, Methodist, Moabite, it's got that M thing, 3 syllables going on.
Very good.
Okay, well, thank you
Hi,
so much.
Avi.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank
Hi,
you.
good
Peter.
night.
I'm Michelle.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Yashikoa.